Isn't it strange? We've mapped the surface of Mars in greater detail than we've mapped the depths of our own ocean. We can send high-resolution signals across galaxies, but so often fail to listen to the softest signal within ourselves. And perhaps more curiously, we can manipulate atoms, split nuclei, and digitize consciousness into silicon circuits, but we still ask the same timeless question that ancient humans once carved into cave walls. Is something out there trying to reach us? It's easy to dismiss this question as the domain of folklore or fantasy. After all, the modern world prides itself on empirical certainty, evidence, measurement, and repeatability. And yet, in quiet moments between the noise, many of us have felt it, a presence, a pattern, a pull, not from some distant galaxy, but from the inner cosmos of our own awareness. From dreams that feel more like messages than memories. From coincidences so precisely timed, they feel authored. From sudden chills on the skin when no wind blows. Now, let's be honest, science doesn't make declarations lightly. It doesn't speculate without method. And it certainly doesn't chase ghosts in the machine. But science, at its core, is not just a body of knowledge. It is a way of questioning. And when enough people across cultures, centuries, and civilizations experience patterns they can't explain, the true scientist doesn't scoff. They lean in. They get curious. So what if, just what if, some of what we call paranormal is simply normal, whose mechanics we haven't yet modeled? What if spirit is a word we use to describe a real phenomenon of consciousness zone that interacts with matter, with memory, with minds just beyond the event horizon of our current understanding? Let's start with something we all experience: dreams. From the perspective of neuroscience, dreams are complex firings of the brain cortical and subcortical regions igniting in concert as the body rests. But if that's all they were, why do they so often feel like messages? Why does the death of a loved one appear in dreams not just once, but persistently and speak with a clarity that the waking mind can't match? Why do symbols emerge, not random, but loaded with meaning? Across history, from the Oracle of Delphi to the psychiatric couch of Freud, from tribal shamans to quantum physicists studying entanglement, the dream world has always been more than a hallucination. It is a frontier liminal realm where consciousness and something else may interact. Could it be that in this dream state, where our cognitive filters soften, we become better receivers for signals not of this world, but of another mode of existence entirely? Or consider synchronicity, a term coined by Carl Jung to describe meaningful coincidences. You think of someone and you ask for a sign, and the same phrase appears repeatedly in books, conversations, and even billboards. Statistically, this seems implausible, but probabilistically, especially when viewed through the lens of entropy and information theory, there may be more to this patterning than we acknowledge. Just as magnetic fields reveal themselves through iron filings, perhaps consciousness collective or otherwise reveals itself through synchronicity, a form of non-random order, a physics of the improbable. And let's talk about electromagnetic interference. Now, this is where things get interesting. In physics, we know that all matter emits electromagnetic radiation, everything from your body heat to the cosmic microwave background left over from the Big Bang. Our technologies, phones, radios, satellite uplinks, are all tuned to specific frequencies. But what happens when those frequencies are disrupted? Not by weather, not by battery failure, but by presence. If spiritual antecedent, as some researchers propose, extra-dimensional intelligence sexist, it stands to reason they wouldn't necessarily manifest in visible light or audible sound. They might manifest through perturbations in the electromagnetic spectrum through flickering lights, disrupted devices, static in communication lines. We already know that solar flares can interrupt radio waves. Why not another kind of wave produced by a different kind of presence? You see, we often assume that if something is real, it must be observable. But quantum mechanics shattered that notion a century ago. Particles can exist in two places at once. Observing a system can change its behavior. Entangled particles communicate instantaneously across vast distances, no signal, no time delay. This isn't science fiction. This is peer-reviewed physics, and it suggests that reality is far stranger and more layered than we've been taught to believe. So when someone tells you they feel a presence in the room, that they sense a whisper in their consciousness, that they saw a loved one in a dream with perfect clarity, maybe the most scientific response isn't to scoff, but to ask, what system of laws might explain this? What kind of energy could behave like this? What layers of consciousness remain uncharted, like deep oceans beneath our cognitive continents? Let's move to biology. Did you know that our Bodius, specifically our hearts, emit a measurable electromagnetic field that can extend several feet from the body? The Heart Math Institute has studied this for decades. When two people sit close together, their heart rhythms can synchronize. When someone enters a room in a highly emotional state, others feel it, sometimes without seeing a facial expression or hearing a word. Is this merely body language, or are we picking up signals from a field not bound by skin or bone, but by resonance? Dolores Cannon, the hypnotherapist whose work inspired this exploration, believe we carry a multi-dimensional memoria spiritual architecture encoded not just in our neurons, but in our energetic signature. Through regression sessions, her clients accessed information far beyond their lived experience, sometimes describing lives, environments, and intelligences that defy our conventional timelines. Some called it reincarnation. Others called it cosmic memory. But what if, regardless of what we call it reflects a reality wherein consciousness is not confined to the body, but moves through it like light through a prism? And what if animals, those seemingly instinctual beings who so often stare into corners we dismiss as empty, what if their perceptual filters are simply tuned to different frequencies than ours? Bees can see ultraviolet light. Dogs can smell disease. Birds can detect magnetic fields. The world we perceive as a tiny slice of the full electromagnetic spectrum. So why not admit that our human sensory limitations may be blinding us to real presence as real intelligence moving all around us? This isn't to say that every flicker of a bulb or tingling of the skin is a message from the beyond, but it does suggest that our refusal to question what we've dismissed may be the only thing standing between us and an expanded understanding of consciousness. The same way radio waves existed long before radios were invented, maybe spirit communication has always existed, we're just now learning how to tune in. The deeper truth here is humbling. The cosmos doesn't revolve around us, but it may be speaking to us not with words, with patterns, with presence, with probabilities stacked just high enough to get your attention. Maybe the language of the spirit world is not English, or binary code, or even sound. Maybe it's resonance. Maybe it's felt, not heard, sensed, not seen. And here's where it becomes deeply personal. Because if the universe is conscious, if it is capable of signaling through synchronicity, symbolism, or sensation, then it also implies that you, the observer, matter. That your thoughts, your openness, your attunement affect the flow of that communication. This transforms the question from, is something out there trying to reach me, into a more urgent one, am I willing to listen? Our ancestors lit fires to speak to the gods. Today we light screens and call it progress. But true progress isn't in pixels per inch. It's in perception per moment. In the expansion of what we allow ourselves to consider. The cosmos is not just stars, and planets sit as possibility. And possibility, when paired with observation, is the birthplace of science. So listen to your dreams, to your intuitions, to the quiet anomalies that seem too precise to be random. Don't discard them, don't fear them, observe them, question them, and above all, honor them, for they may be the early language of a universe trying to remind you that it is not silent, that you are not alone, that the boundary between the visible and the invisible is not a wall, but a window. And every now and then, just maybe it opens. You see, when people report a sign from the spirit world, they're often dismissed not maliciously, but out of discomfort. Because to entertain that possibility is to admit we don't yet understand the full bandwidth of reality. And that frightens us more than we like to admit. After all, if reality contains phenomena we cannot measure, cannot predict, and cannot replicate then, what does that say about the assumptions upon which we built our entire worldview? Let's pause here not to panic, but to consider science is not a closed system. It is a growing frontier. And every great leap in understanding gravity, relativity, quantum mechanics was once a disturbance in the comfort of the known. What if the same is true of consciousness? What if the universe isn't merely a physical place we occupy, but a dynamic relationship we are engaged in? A feedback loop between matter and mind, between signal and seeker? Now, consider this. Your brain produces measurable electromagnetic activity. These patterns are so reliable that hospitals can hook you up to an EEG machine and track the frequency of your thoughts. But what most people don't consider is that this brainwave activity isn't confined to your skull. It radiates outward, however subtly, into space. So here's the question. If you are emitting a frequency, what or who might be listening? In the same way a radio station needs a transmitter and a receiver, perhaps human consciousness serves both roles. We transmit emotion, attention, curiosity, and we receive impressions, ideas, and sometimes messages. Many describe them as coming from beyond. But what if they're actually from within a deeper layer of the self that lives beyond the limits of language and ego? A layer that perceives reality, not through sight or sound, but through resonance, through intuition. Think of it this way. We live in a multi-layered spectrum of perception. Our eyes see a narrow band of visible light. Our ears hear a tiny sliver of sound frequencies. But the full range of energy in the universe, from gamma rays to radio waves, is far wider than we can perceive unaided. That doesn't mean those frequencies don't exist. It means we need instruments to detect them. Telescopes, antennas, sensors. So the next natural question is, what if the spirit world, if it exists, operates in frequencies we haven't yet built tools for? Or, worse, frequencies we've trained ourselves to ignore? As children, we're more attuned to these things. We play with imaginary friends. We speak to shadows. We feel things that can't be explained. But then society teaches us to suppress that sensitivity. We're taught to favor facts over feelings, certainty over intuition, logic over mystery. But mystery isn't the enemy of science. It's the birthplace of it. Every question ever asked by a scientist began with mystery. And perhaps one of the greatest mysteries of all is this. Why do so many people-rational, intelligent, grounded people report uncanny encounters with something more? Let me tell you a story. In a quiet lab, nestled in the Colorado mountains, a group of scientists once conducted an experiment where participants were asked to meditate on a person in another room. The goal? To send them warmth, compassion, a sense of peace. The results were subtle but measurable. The recipients reported temperature shifts, mood elevation, even chills. The skeptics called it placebo. But the patterns persisted. Over time, enough data accumulated to suggest intention itself may carry a frequency. That thought-focused, sincere, and emotionally charged can travel. So again, I ask, what are we sending out into the universe each day? And more importantly, what signals might be coming back unnoticed, like whispers lost in static? Let's dig deeper into this. The pineal gland, often referred to historically as the seat of the soul, is located deep in the center of the brain. Biologically, it regulates melatonin and circadian rhythms, but structurally, it contains photoreceptive cells similar to those in our eyes. Why would nature design an internal structure capable of detecting light in a place where light cannot reach? It raises a question. Is this gland a kind of internal antenna? Not for sunlight, but for inner light, for signals from a consciousness not confined to the skull, but connected to something larger? Now, let's revisit the idea of presence. Not the kind you measure in meters or kilograms, but the kind you feel in a room. You've experienced it. We all have. You walk into a space and immediately feel that something's off. Or conversely, you sit beside someone and feel an unspoken warmth. We chalk it up to vibes, but scientifically speaking, it may be rooted in the electromagnetic fields that every living being generates. Heart rate variability studies show that when two people are emotionally attuned, say, a mother and child, or lifelong partners, their heart rhythms synchronize. This phenomenon doesn't require speech. It doesn't require touch. It only requires proximity and resonance. And if such synchronization is possible between two humans, why not between a human and something beyond? Now, let's ask a more provocative question. If we, through dreams, emotions, or sensory anomalies, are capable of perceiving these presences, then what is the nature of that perception? Is it hallucination? Is it memory? Or is it an emergent sense that science hasn't yet categorized? Just as fish don't know they're wet, maybe we're immersed in a sea of consciousness we have no name for. A field, a web, a fabric of awareness that doesn't just surround us, but includes us. Physicist David Bohm once proposed that all of reality is interconnected at a deeper level, a hidden order beneath what we perceive a quantum field, where information is shared instantly beyond the speed of light. It's radical, it's beautiful, and it might just be the missing link between science and spirituality. So what do we do with all of this? How do we honor the evidence without claiming certainty? We do what science has always done. We observe, we record, we remain open. The same way astronomers scan the sky for radio waves, hoping to hear from distant civilizations, perhaps we must begin scanning the sky within. And that begins with paying attention to your dreams, to synchronicities, to the strange way a feather shows up on your doorstep the day after you prayed for a sign, to the flicker of a light bulb the moment you speak aloud the name of someone you lost. Not to invent meaning where there is none, but to acknowledge that meaning may sometimes exist before the measurement. Because in the final analysis, the boundary between science and spirit may not be a wall, it may be a mirror. And what we see in it depends on how we choose to look. So where does this leave us? We stand at the edge of a paradox, a species fluent in data but often deaf to the mystery behind it. We've decoded the genome, but still struggle to decode grief. We've measured the spin of electrons, but can't explain the spin of a compass needle in the presence of loss. It turns. We feel something, and we call it presence, but we don't know why. And perhaps that's the very point. We live in a universe governed by symmetry and imperfection. The cosmic microwave background radiation from the birth of the universe is not uniform. It's scattered with fluctuations, tiny anomalies. And yet, it's precisely these imperfections that allowed galaxies to form, stars to burn, life to emerge. What if the imperfections in our daily lives, the anomalies, the chills, the strange coincidences, are not glitches to ignore, but portals of awareness we haven't learned to walk through? Let's bring this idea closer to home. Think about the feeling you get when you walk into a forest or stare up at the night sky. You feel something ancient, something intelligent, something quietly immense. That sensation, that inexplicable hum of being connected to everything and yet humbled by your own small nisus, not imagination, it's not sentimentality, it's physics meeting philosophy. It's your nervous system reacting to the electromagnetic silence of nature, your limbic brain tuned to ancestral rhythms, your atoms remembering where they came from. Because here's the astonishing truth. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a dying star. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in your lungs, these did not originate on Earth. They are the residue of stellar explosions scattered across the cosmos, gathered by gravity, shaped by biology, and now speaking to you through you. That alone should make us pause. If our origins are cosmic, why wouldn't our consciousness be cosmic too? And if consciousness extends beyond the body, beyond neurons and synapses, then it's not unreasonable to imagine that it can also persist beyond death. Now, I don't say this lightly. Science demands rigor, but it also demands courage. And it takes courage to admit what we don't yet understand. Studies of near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and shared death visions challenge the finality we once assumed about death. People blind from birth describing vivid, detailed visual experiences during clinical death. Patients without brain activity recalling precise moments from hospital rooms. In lab terms, this is noise. But in human terms, it's a pattern. And patterns, when repeated across time and culture, are the seeds of new discovery. And speaking of patterns, let's look at language. Across cultures and religions, across deserts and islands, we find nearly identical reports. A tunnel of light, a presence of love, a review of one's life, not with judgment, but clarity. The consistency of these reports across people who've never met, never studied each other's doctrines, should give us pause. This is not anecdote. This is data. Soft data, yes, but soft like sand beneath your feet. It supports you whether you believe in it or not. Now imagine this. What if every ghost story, every gut feeling, every inexplicable moment of deja vu is not a failure of logic, but a feature of a wider consciousness interface we haven't learned to navigate? The way you wouldn't blame a radio for not playing a station it's not tuned to, perhaps we've simply forgotten how to tune our internal instruments to frequencies outside of our cultural bandwidth. Take electromagnetic sensitivity, for example. Some people can feel changes in energy fields before storms. Others report knowing when someone is about to call or when a loved one has just passed, even if they're thousands of miles away. We don't have a precise mechanism to explain these phenomena yet. But absence of explanation is not absence of reality. Before we understood bacteria, we called disease a curse. Before we understood relativity, we thought time was absolute. History reminds us that skepticism without curiosity is just denial in disguise. So, where do we go from here? We go inward, not to retreat into fantasy, but to explore the last great frontier, the mind. Not just the brain, the measurable mechanical organ, but the mind, the experiencer, the observer behind the eyes. Physics has long debated the role of observation in shaping reality. The double-slit experiment suggests that particles behave differently when observed. This isn't poetry, it's peer-reviewed quantum mechanics. And it implies that consciousness and the universe are not separate, they are partners, co-creators, co-authors of what we call reality. Now let's circle back to the beginning. You felt it, haven't you? That nudge, that whisper, that synchronicity that arrives so precisely, it bypasses logic and goes straight to the soul. The dream that felt like a reunion, the feather on your path, the flickering light when you spoke aloud to someone who's no longer here. You can ignore these things. You're free to dismiss them, but if you're still listening, it means you haven't, and maybe that's the point. Maybe the spirit world, if it exists, isn't trying to prove itself to you. Maybe it's waiting to see if you're still paying attention, because contact doesn't always look like a glowing orb or a booming voice. Sometimes it's subtle. A pattern in your dreams, a warmth in your chest, a melody on the radio that carries a memory you didn't know you needed. The language of the cosmos is rarely loud. It's elegant, and to understand it, we must learn to listen with more than ears. We must listen with awareness, with humility, with reverence for the possibility that reality is deeper, richer, and more interactive than we were taught, and maybe, just maybe, by honoring these moments not as delusions, but as data, we become better scientists, better seekers, better humans. So the next time the lights flicker, or a song plays that feels too timely, or you wake from a dream that leaves you breathless, don't rush to label it. Just pause, listen. Not for answers, but for the question behind the question. Because maybe the universe isn't asking you to understand. Maybe it's just asking you to notice. If the universe is asking us to notice, then maybe the next evolution of our intelligence isn't about inventing smarter machines, it's about refining our attention. Because what we choose to notice and what we ignore defines the shape of our reality. A telescope doesn't create galaxies, it reveals them. A microscope doesn't generate life, it unveils it. And your awareness, your most sensitive, most personal instrument is no different. It doesn't fabricate meaning, it reveals it. The question is, are you willing to look? Now, here's where we often stumble. In our pursuit of truth, we tend to divide the world into two camps, the measurable and the meaningless. If it can't be weighed, we wave it away. But history warns us against this hubris. Germs were once invisible, so were radio waves. Black holes were once mathematical rumors, and consciousness? We still haven't fully mapped what it is, let alone where it comes from, and yet we live by it. Every decision, every memory, every feeling of love or loss originates from something we can't put under a microscope. We know how neurons fire, yes, but why does a memory of your grandmother still bring tears years after she's gone? Why does a scent, a melody, a breeze carry with it the echo of someone you've loved? We tell ourselves it's just memory, just chemicals. But what if it's more? What if memory is not stored only in your brain, but in your your energy signature? What if those you've lost are not lost at all, but entangled with you in a way that physics has only begun to glimpse? Entanglement. It's a strange and sacred word in quantum physics. Two particles, no matter how far apart, can become linked so that the state of one instantly affects the other. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Today, it's demonstrable science, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's the invisible architecture of love. Maybe that's why when someone you're deeply connected to thinks of you, you feel it. Maybe that's why in moments of crisis, you instinctively know who to call. Could it be that the spirit world isn't a separate location, but a different frequency within the same field? Like a second radio station broadcasting on a different wavelength zone we occasionally brush against when we're grieving, dreaming, meditating, or simply quiet enough to feel? Ask yourself this: when have you felt most connected to something beyond yourself? Was it in a cathedral, a hospital room, at a funeral, on a mountain? Was it in complete silence when the chatter of daily life fell away? The common thread in all of these moments is not the place that's the presence, the stillness, the clarity of being present enough to feel something more. That more may not speak in words. It may not follow grammar, but it communicates through warmth, through shivers, through timing, through symbols so personal, so tailored, they could only have been meant for you. A feather, a flicker, a voice on the wind that sounds just for a second like someone you miss. What do you do with that? You don't worship it. You don't build a doctrine around it. You simply acknowledge it. You say, I see you. And sometimes that's all it takes to open the door. Because contact, true contact, isn't about spectacle. It's about sincerity. It's about the meeting point between attention and awe, between the known and the unknowable. It's easy to believe we're alone. After all, the universe is vast, but so is your consciousness. And if consciousness is truly a fundamental property of the cosmos, as some physicists and philosophers now propose it, then you are not a passive observer. You are a participant, a co-creator, a node in the web of awareness that stretches across space and time. And if that's true, then when the spirit world reaches out, it's not breaking the rules of physics. It's playing by rules we haven't written down yet. So maybe it's time to update the map, not by abandoning science, but by expanding it, by embracing the idea that the frontier of understanding is not just out there in telescopes and particle accelerators, but in here. In the quiet, in the questions, in the moments between thoughts where something else might be listening. Something that doesn't care about your credentials or your dogma or your disbelief. Something that only asks, are you paying attention? Because here's a secret most scientists know, but rarely say aloud: mystery is not weakness. It's a signal. It means we've reached the edge of what we know, and that edge is where discovery begins. The cosmos has always spoken in photons, in gravity, in hydrogen lines, but maybe it also speaks in synchronicity, in symbols, in silence. Maybe spirit, if it exists, is not the opposite of science, but its next chapter. But the pen is in your hands. The experiment is ongoing. And you, observer, participant, soul in a skin souter, the living instrument through which that signal might finally be heard. So here we are, at the edge of what we can explain, and the beginning of what we must feel our way through. For all our equations, we still cannot define the source of consciousness. For all our telescopes, we cannot yet measure the soul. But we can, if we're honest to admit, we sense it. In the stillness between breaths, in the silence after loss, in the knowing that arises without reason, but never without meaning. It's not proof in the lab that always changes the world its perspective. When Copernicus said the Earth was not the center of the universe, he didn't kill mystery. He made it infinite. And maybe when we accept that the invisible might be real, that the spirit world might exist not above us, but within the architecture of reality itself, we don't replace science with superstition. We invite science to grow because ultimately this isn't about ghosts or gadgets. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that reality may be participatory, that the observer matters, that the universe doesn't just unfold around you, it unfolds through you. And in that unfolding, signs may come, not to scare, not to control, but to remind you, you are part of something vast, something intelligent, something impossibly kind. The feather, the flicker, the whisper, they are not interruptions to the system. They may be the system whispering back to you through its own syntax of wonder. So the next time you sense something, a dream that feels like a message, a pattern that feels too poetic to be chance, a presence you can't name but cannot deny, don't rush to label it. Don't run from it. Instead, pause, acknowledge, and remember. The most beautiful truths are not the ones shouted from mountaintops, but the ones whispered into the quiet of a listening soul. We don't need to choose between science and spirit. We need only to be brave enough to ask better questions, to let the universe be bigger than our fears, and to let our lives be more than just a sequence of events, but a conversation, a collaboration, a cosmic dialogue conducted across dimensions of matter, meaning, and mystery. Because if this is a universe in which atoms remember stars and minds can feel across distance, then what else is possible? And maybe, just maybe, the signs from the spirit world are not sent to amaze us. They are sent to awaken us, to remind us that we are not alone in the dark, but part of the light that makes it visible. And in that light, there are messages. And in those messages, there is meaning. And in that meaning, there is you.